Hey, it's your girl Abby, aka New Age Coach here. I am lighting the way for those on their way to the light, and to my soul vibers, that is those of you who are already subscribed. Thank you. Anyone new just tuning in, welcome. On the channel, we talk all things self and soul development. So if you like that vibe and want to join the tribe, hit subscribe. In this segment of Coaching New Age Coach, it's where I post about once a month and I introduce you all to fantastical human beings. Anything from entrepreneurs to spiritual business owners, soul entrepreneurs to other YouTubers and healers and just awesome humans doing awesome things, lighting their own way in making this world a better and brighter place. So that's what this segment, Coaching New Age Coach, is all about. I am super excited to introduce you to our guest of the day. So, not even gonna talk anymore. Let's just get right on into it. Here we go. I would like to introduce our lovely guest of the day, Miss Ann Baker, who is the owner of ATMO Architecture. And we are going to talk plenty about her business. But from what I understand, it is the perfect blend of bridging physical design with energy and space, and most importantly, conscious intention, which I think is the hugest differentiator in the space that you're in. And Anne has her own YouTube channel, which is amazing. So I will link that below. So make sure you go check it out. And also on her YouTube channel, she takes it a step deeper and she applies these concepts of spirituality and metaphysics and, again, energy and space with her already powerful credentials of having her bachelor's and master's degree in architecture. So I think it's beautiful that you really help us all kind of not only make our exterior worlds beautiful and be the architecture of our lives that way, but really the architecture of our internal worlds as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on this segment. I really appreciate it. And I know that couldn't do justice for everything you do. So I'm so excited to talk to you. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what ATMO Architecture is and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I think you summed it up really beautifully already. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited to just get to know you better and share what I have to share. And so my name's Anne. I live in the Seattle area. And I have an architecture firm called ATMO Architecture that I've had for like 2.5 years now. And I'm kind of in the process of transforming it, like evolving it into more of a spiritual practice combined with an architectural practice, and kind of like what you already touched on. So the word Atmo, it's the Greek root of atmosphere, and for me it means in essence like smoke, steam, or vapor. So to me that's like the perfect representation of this in between the physical and the ethereal, of like when you think of a space that has atmosphere, it's like more of a feeling that you get in your body and in your soul. Yep. And it's like it can be hard to track down like what exactly is causing that, but for me it's really the combination of conscious intention combined with design and aesthetics and like how things are even constructed, and putting intention into every layer of it that creates that end result. So that's like what I'm really interested in exploring, is what creates those atmospheres and how can we use that to heal people, and how can space and how can architecture be healing.
That's so beautiful, and you're so articulate. Another thing the audience should know is, I've told you so many times, I always tell Anne every time I watch her video that I love her brain, because some of the concepts and ideals that you're working for, and we'll talk a little bit about how you want to kind of transform where you started your business, kind of where you want to take it, more of that soul spirituality vibe. It's your brain is just, it blows my mind away. Like the world needs to hear these concepts and ideas, and I think you're honestly on the forefront of creating kind of this new bridge. It's amazing. And I know you wanted to kind of get the message out a little bit more. So was that your inspiration to start your YouTube channel, or what was your kind of inspiration to talk about these concepts and kind of give people a sneak peek behind the scenes of just these physical spaces too?
Yeah, so the YouTube came, I would say, primarily out of just wanting to share these ideas that I have. Architecture is like, it's one of these fields that's very professional. It's almost like the culture of it is almost kind of like like law or medicine where it's just like super professional and super like three-dimensional, you know? So especially as a woman in the space, it's, you know, it's still not quite like balanced in that way as far as gender. So, but it's also for me, like bringing the divine feminine into the field of architecture. And so just wanting to share some different perspectives that I have, because I also think a lot of people are so hungry for this, like, this spiritual dimension that, you know, and I think like what's going on the planet, like so many people are up to this whole other reality and dimension. And so there's so many people in different spaces and in different fields who are like bringing whatever they're doing into this new dimension that we're coming into as a human.
Makes me so excited.
Body. I know, me too. And then like, so the other side of I think my intention with creating the channel was, one, to share, but also just to kind of like find my people. And, you know, like you're a perfect example of, you're like, you just get me, and you're like, we light each other up, I think, and your content is amazing too. And so
do you mind actually carrying that into kind of where you started with ATMO architecture, or even before you decided to step into your business, and knowing kind of how structured it was around any fears, or just how you made the jump to have your own business and really start to talk about some of these concepts, and what that experience is kind of like, breaking some of these paradigms and really being a trendsetter and a trailblazer for something like this, like bridging kind of spirituality and architecture?
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing process, you know, and it's all kind of unfolded incrementally. But I always knew from a young age that I wanted to do my own thing and have my own business. And basically, so with architecture, you have to get licensed as an architecture in your state before you can practice. So I went through that whole process. Like, that whole process takes years, and there's a lot involved. But it was basically, I think, like a week after I got my license, I like got my LLC and built a website and stuff. And I worked for other architects while I was building a client base and like getting enough business to survive on my own. So as far as starting a business, that part was actually pretty easy for me, because I just was like ready to bust out, and I was just really bored, like working for other firms, you know, like I just wasn't challenged and excited. So that part was pretty easy for me. The most difficult part has been like finding the courage to speak about what's really going on inside of me, you know, and like my head and my heart. And it's, you know, I think that is just a reflection of our culture in general, is that we're so separated from spirit just as a culture. And whether that's intentional or unintentional, like there is this stigma about talking about anything spiritual. And so for me, it's been, especially in my field, because it is so like professional and 3D in general, it's been mostly for me just finding the courage to start talking and start sharing and really to start being myself. But I think like YouTube has played into a big part into finding that courage, because you see all of these other people all over the world just sharing their
purpose and sharing it, just owning their purpose and like it's part of like, you're almost, sometimes I feel what you reminded me of, sometimes even now, it's when you work in industries like you said that are so tied to this 3D. Like for me personally, I work in a place where it's not necessarily where you can be yourself. It always feels like you're hiding a little bit of who you are because of these concepts, and really stepping into saying, you know, when I shared, for example, that I have a YouTube channel with people at work, it was almost like, it was liberating. It was just like, you know what, there's no more hiding. I've just like stepped out. It's like, take me who I am. And when you step into that alignment, it's almost like you said, you start attracting the fans of the world, you know, all of these people that you can have these conversations with. And then also you eradicate the fear, because what happens is you realize you still have those people in your life that are meant to be. Like I didn't get fired, for example, you know what I mean? Now you're thriving in your business. So it's like almost like it's a dual purpose of stepping into your purpose, but also eradicating some of these fears. And the more you keep doing that process is part of your own growth.
But and it also kind of acts, you know, it's like when you're not fully speaking, so it's like the throat chakra, right? If you're not speaking and actually sharing who you are, like nobody can see you. I feel like for a long time I was like, oh, people will be able to find me, and like, you know, all of these dream projects that I wanted to happen, like they're not gonna come to me if I'm just like staying silent and not, you know, really stepping out. It's like, you kind of have to like have the courage to step out and take those risks before the opportunities like come to you, you know? So that's what I'm finding more and more.
So is it more of like a chicken and an egg in terms of your spiritual awakening, if you will? Like, how does your spiritual awakening story come into play with your purpose, where you're at now, maybe where you started, or did you even realize you were going through kind of a spiritual awakening? Or walk us through kind of how you understand what's happened from point A to point B, like where you are today.
Yeah, so for me, it's kind of come in like waves throughout my life. So I remember when I was like a little kid, I would like go around my backyard and like talk to all of the flowers and stuff like that. And I was
Still
like,
do that
really
when you were a kid? I do that now.
Yeah, well now I do too, yeah. But like I have memories of being just really tapped into like nature and like, you know, doing my thing. And like I grew up Christian, so I was like from a young age, like I just had that sense of connection to God, and that was like taught to me, and so that was always there. And then I would say when I was like a teenager, I kind of like had to rebel against that, of course. So I was like, I'm doing my own thing. I'm gonna like, look, I have to like figure it out for myself, kind of thing. And I always kind of like, even though I didn't necessarily like subscribe to that religious perspective anymore, I still kind of maintained like, even when I wasn't so religious, like a kind of a sense of agnosticism, and like there's something out there, there's like guiding forces, there's like higher powers, things like that. So I never fully lost that. But I did kind of explore more like new agey, like witchcrafty types of things that were all in the light, but just like alternative ways of looking at things, you know? And so I kind of like went about that dabbling for a while. And then let's see. So I would say like I had my biggest sort of like dark night of the soul throughout my 20s, like mostly coming in the form of relationships and traumatic things happening in relationships. And that was kind of like, okay, so related to what's happening now, like, so I was gaslighted for a long time in one relationship and like lied to and like told that I was insane and that stuff. And I've now come to see it as it's like serving me right now with like waking up to what is going on with the world and how the world operates. I'm like, oh, like this was all
always in hindsight, 2020, you know why you go through the things you go through, for sure.
Exactly. And then so a big thing that happened like a few months ago is also I went on an ayahuasca retreat. And so that just like blasted me open and like that, and it was really just like a kick in the butt of like this is your purpose, like it's time to be a butterfly, you know. It's like we're gonna get going.
Saying here that I want to dissect and dive into, so I'm going to parse it out. So first one being, before we get to ayahuasca, because I think that's going to be a good story time, and maybe just even explaining a little bit for people who might not know what that is. So we'll go down that route. But what you brought up this whole idea, you said new agey kind of witchcrafty thing, and I just like that you brought that up, because part of what I wanted to ask you eventually are some of these things around misconceptions about spirituality, or even the word spirituality turning some people off, right, because of assumptions and preconceived notions, which might lead to why you don't want to frame it that way, especially even in your business, or how you're talking about some of these concepts, which is why you back it by like science and quantum physics or metaphysics, things that are more tangible and still 3D, even though they have these spiritual kind of essences to them, right? It's meeting people at their level, but it's around misconceptions. And I'm curious, in your experience, when you bring up something like new agey or witchy, like what are your experiences in terms of misconceptions overall about spirituality?
I would say in like a lot of different spiritual factions, there's a lot of judgment about anything that's like outside of your own belief system. And so since I've explored so many different belief systems and perspectives, I'm like kind of a belief system like adventurer, I feel like. And
let me have a little piece of all of these.
I'm like, I just want to like see what's out there and try different things on. As far as like, so what you would call witchcraft, I see it as more of like an earth-based religion. So that's really getting into the elements of like using like fire, water, air, and earth. And to me, that's more of like just earth science and like earth, you know, like I talk about in one of my videos, the electromagnetic field of the earth. And you could see that as very like esoteric and spiritual, but that's actually just like electromagnetics. Like it's just science. It's just science. And so like for me, I get really the most excited when like science and spirituality are one, and I don't see them as separate. I see it as all just truth, you know? And so like, I think when you like from the scientific perspective, a lot of science like completely denies anything spiritual, and a lot of spiritual stuff completely denies anything scientific. And so I just get really happy when they
Me too. I get so excited, and I think part of my path lately has been doing exactly what you're doing, kind of taking pieces of not even just science and spirituality, but I talked in a different coaching New Age coach about even psychology, right? Or psychology, biology, anything. I termed it as anything that ends in ology or anything like that. Like it's just we're all in some way, shape, or form talking about the same concepts, and it's just a matter of meeting people at their own language. If someone wants to talk more science-based because that's their reality and how they understand a concept, being able to speak underlying truth, it's all the same truth. Or if someone is more not tapped into science or spirituality, being able to say, well, Freudian, you know, concept, or the, you know, whatever psychological or neural pathways, right? We talk about actual science and medicine, just wherever people are at, being able to use different concepts. It's just a matter of being able to speak different languages to say kind of the same thing is how I look at it right now.
Exactly. And I think we get so caught up in semantics, and like a lot of these arguments they're really just like, we don't agree on the words that we're using. Like it's all just semantics, but we believe the same things essentially.
And that's so beautiful for even what's going on in the world, like even fundamentally, it's like we're all saying the same thing. We want justice, we want what's right, we want these things, but we all use it's and that's our humanness, which is the funniest part. It is our language, it is these barriers that make us human that also cause the issues that we're trying to make sense of.
I know. And so I try, like right now I'm really just obsessed with this idea of like breaking down the polarity that exists with current events and stuff. And like one people think this, one people say this, but we like
missing the point of transcending polarity.
Exactly. And like my perspective is that because I follow people of like all kinds of different ideas and viewpoints, and like we're really not as divided as we perceive. Absolutely. We are like at the, you know, there's like extreme people and like psychopaths all over the place, but like for the most part, like we're all kind of on the same page, you know, so we just need to realize that.
I so agree. And it seems so simple. And then I'm just like, it seems so simple also. But then you have like Dark Nights of the Souls where something so simple will have you like in a fetal position, like asking a million questions, even though, you know, it's such a journey, like this whole ride. And I think that's a good segue when we talk about fetal position to bring us back to ayahuasca, because I'm sure there was a lot of reflection and like, oh my God, who am I? What am I? And learning about yourself through that process. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your understanding of what ayahuasca is first, just to give some context, and start maybe with what led you there, because I know a lot of people on a spiritual path talk about this calling and hearing Mother Aya's call. So maybe just give some context there, and then how you know, found your way to the call.
Well, I mean, I've been aware of ayahuasca for several years. I think probably about 5 or 6 years ago was when I kind of first heard about it. And as soon as I heard of it, I was like, one day I'm like definitely going to do that. Like I didn't feel ready for it at the time, but I was like, that like it's going to happen one day. Yeah. And so how I like overall how I view it is that it is a technology, and that it's like a kind of an interdimensional technology that is basically a gift to the human species, as are other plant medicines, you know, but it's like one of the most amazing tools I think that we have, and I think it's going to come into play a lot in the future of evolving as a species. But I started feeling very called to do this like in probably like December of last year, so like a few months ago, and it was just like, I think I watched a bunch of YouTube videos of like people's experiences, like obsessively.
I literally obsessively could not stop watching them for seriously like 2 weeks. I know exactly what you mean when you say that.
I just had like this insatiable like need to like get into it. And then, so at some point I was like, I just need to do this. Like, and so I went to a place called Rhythmia, which you've probably heard of because it's on YouTube all over.
I have, I'm going to like shamelessly self-plug, but when I first started, I've been on my spiritual journey, if you will. I mean, it's a life journey, but so I became into awareness that I was going through this about a year and a half ago, but that was one of my like maybe top 4 videos, like when I started YouTube, was how I was getting this calling for this. I didn't even know what it was, but all these synchronicities started to happen in my life where it kept being brought up, like what it was. And then I went on this path where I had this insatiable thirst to figure it out. Then for my birthday, like all these number synchronicities, and I got this book that Jerry Powell wrote, the owner of Rhythmia, but like all these connections. And then I asked in like an intention, like, show me a snake, because it's always associated with a snake. And I have a whole video of like just a list of synchronicities that happen, how I've been called, and knowing just one day it's in my path. I haven't yet stepped into it, but Rhythmia is the place that I've said in that video for like almost over a year ago now. Like it's in before all of this stuff happened and it closed down. But I know exactly the kind of that insatiable thirst and all of the calling. And I talk about what that calling sounds like, some things that have happened kind of in that video, which is why I'm so excited. So then, I mean, this is a synchronicity in itself that I've connected with you, you've gone to the place that I am feeling called to. And that's why I'm so curious about your experience and kind of hear what that was like.
So Rhythmia is amazing. I was really drawn to it just because it's so like, it feels so safe there, and you're very, very well taken care of and all of that. And, you know, they have like psychologists and like doctors, it's medically licensed. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do it, like I'm going to feel comfortable here, you know? So definitely amazing. And also they just do a lot of education. Like they really prepare you to go into the experience and be intentional about it. And like, then they, you know, there's a lot of integration work. So I like that part too. So I would say I was mostly like, my whole intention was probably for the most part to heal some of these like relationship wounds that I had and stuff from my childhood and things like that. Like just stuff that was like my karma, like kept repeating. And
same things,
And like, I mean, I've also done a lot of therapy. I've been in therapy since I was like 18. So I've done a lot of that work, but it's still, there's like something that's like
layers,
not like not fully healed. So I, let's see how to break this down. But so at Rhythmia, you do 4 nights of ceremony, right? So, I would say the first night, it was like, so my intention going into it was, show me who I've become, which is like Rhythmia gives you these specific
like,
intentions.
to work like templates for like the days or the miracles, like show me who I am, into your soul, and
they have like this process that's like super worked out and like efficient. So the first night it was like, it didn't work on me for a while. It was like a couple hours and I was just like, it's not working. Like I'm getting left behind. Like everyone else is puking.
And you're like, oh, wait a minute. That's the lesson, isn't it? That's the lesson.
Exactly. So eventually I was like, oh, and then I like went up and, you know, I was like, I'm not feeling anything. What's wrong? It's not working. And then, they were like, they gave me some more and it kicked in and it was just like this, like the most intense feeling of just unconditional love that I've ever felt in my whole life. And so at the end of it, I would say really the medicine is just this vibration of love, and the plant is like so high vibrational that it really just takes you there. And the way that it makes sense to me is like, it's so high vibrational that everything that doesn't match that, like that's stuck in your body, it like has to come out. So that's why
the purging is what they call. People have a misconception like you do this and you're just like pooping your brains out or throwing up, but they don't really understand that yawning or some of these other things, but it's really that energetic release of purging. And yes, that may be sometimes in those ways, but it's deeper than that, like you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, and I think that was one thing that I wasn't expecting going into it, was like, I thought it was going to be like super scary and intense. And for some people it is that way. But for me, it was, mostly I was like, oh, this is just unconditional love. Like I thought I was going to go in and I had this idea that I was going to go in and like be punished for like all of the like negative energy I had accumulated. And I was like, no, that's not what this is. It's like, this is just love, and it's like releasing anything that doesn't match that. So it completely like changed my whole idea of like
what love is, especially from relationships, if that was your main kind of intention going in, understanding that love is within you first before from others too, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And then also that first night so we were in this, this big building that everybody is in the ceremony in. And I basically saw the whole building as like this glowing green energy. And it was like the building itself was like conscious and like, so for a lot of the night I just had my hands like on the wall.
I'm so jealous. I love this so much. Like, I literally love these stories so much.
I know. It's like my favorite thing. It's so cool. But that to me was also like kind of, I think, where this idea of buildings having consciousness comes from, because it was literally, I was like watching the building just holding this beautiful loving space for everybody to have this experience in. And it was just like, it was just the most beautiful thing too.
It's more about your ayahuasca, but there are a few things in that too that maybe I'll segue back to them just to hear the rest of your ayahuasca stories. But one of them being, you talk about even some of your revolutionary ideas that I want to bring forth in this conversation. So some ideas like, when we talk about crystals, for example, as a modality that holds so much energy and vibration, like you're talking about, and really rethinking the structure of buildings even, or piping to include, crystalline structures, or like concepts like this, or, having an experience where you vision a different structure, literally like crystal domes or like prism shaped buildings, like concepts like that, like where the future, where we could take this, because I love your ideologies around what that could be and what this world could look like through buildings and space, and to your point about holding space and vibration for what you felt. And then the other point that I wanted to talk about was just experience, meaning it doesn't necessarily, right, for anyone watching, it's not that you necessarily have to take ayahuasca or a substance. So ayahuasca is a plant medicine, right? So you don't have to physically take something to achieve kind of that love vibration you're talking about, or to experience this level of consciousness, right? I mean, we all have DMT, which is found that gets activated when you take ayahuasca in your body, and it's tied to your pineal gland, and there's science behind that and those experiences. So you can have that same experience without it. But my point, even beyond that, is when we talk about spirituality, even when we start our YouTube channels and we want to inspire people and activate people and have people realize that there's this other consciousness that exists, right? You get so excited because you're like, everyone can feel this, like ayahuasca or not, it's unconditional love that everyone needs to feel. And how sometimes it's tricky to, like, you have to let people be where they're at without pushing this onto them. That's part of what I'm saying. You also have to understand they're all on their own timeline, but it's about, it's just this unconditional love until someone experiences that spiritual awakening, or that moment when their third eye opens for the first time to even have an experience like you're talking about. I always find it so difficult because it can sometimes be preachy, right? We're saying all these things, or it feels very like, until someone can experience this feeling, which I don't know. I just went on a tangent, but you get what I'm saying? It's this feeling that you talk about through your space with architecture, through ayahuasca, if you choose to do that, through meditation, if you choose to do it that way, whatever. But until someone themselves experiences this internal space that you cultivate, like it's hard, but you want to just scream it from the rooftops. That's probably why you started, why I've started mine, is just like, people, we could do this. This is real. Like, you need to come and figure this out. We could change the world by changing ourselves. Like, it's in here. I saw it. And they're like, what? You're crazy.
Yeah, I know. And I've come to accept at this point that like a lot of people are going to like just think I'm this crazy whack nut. I'm like, that's fine too. But you can't, like, I'm at the point where I just can't like
hold it in
like
anymore.
Change, like dumb myself down anymore. Like I'm here for the people who resonate, and like, like you said, like we're all at different places, and it's like the people who you and I resonate with, not everyone else, and that's fine, so.
It's so beautiful because that's a level of acceptance, and you only get to that through your own process that you've been to. So even acknowledging your work to even say a statement like that, like when you start doing your path and looking back, like you're like, a year ago, I might not have even said that about myself. Like, look where you're at now through this journey. It's just so beautiful when you realize your own self-evolution. Forget all the things we try to do and accomplish and get and build and whatever. That's all great part of this human experience, but it all is an internal progress. And even being able to look back at, whoa, like a year ago, I might not have ever said I would not care what someone else thought about me because I'm doing what I should be doing. That's a huge accomplishment, and that's so exciting even for your journey. But back to ayahuasca, what else happened for the rest of you? Did you get your miracle? That's what they call it, where you kind of, yes, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I got like several miracles, you know, which I think is pretty typical. But yeah, for me, so like I'm trying to remember. Oh, wow. Okay. So the second night, it was just like this crazy journey of like going through wormholes, and like at some point that was like the night that I would say I merged with my soul, which is like you kind of like see your child self, and they like you go on a journey, and but it was just like I could talk about it for like hours and hours, but I'll just say it was like this profound.
I know I'm going to take you up on that. Maybe not on this for everyone else. Sorry, but I'm going to take you up on those hours and hours because I want to hear.
Sure. Yeah, we can go deep. Yeah, later on. But it was, that was like, I definitely had this soul merging experience of kind of like recapturing these lost pieces of my identity and of myself that fragment when you're a child, things like that. And I had this experience of like meeting one of my spirit guides, who's like this little, okay, have you ever heard of a Venezuelan poodle moth?
No.
Okay,
no, I don't even know what context.
I'll email you a picture of it later.
Okay.
But some people might have heard this. It was like an internet sensation a few years back. But it's like this moth from Venezuela that it's like really fluffy and it has these big eyes and like these weird antennas. But it looks like kind of a poodle. So it was kind of like that, like the size of a cat, but like a Venezuelan poodle moth kind of looking creature, but like kind of like translucent too. But I had the experience of meeting her, and it was like I heard her like tapping. It's gonna sound weird, but she was like tapping these little stones around my head. Like we're beyond that.
Yeah. We started it. It was weird. We're past that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like she was whispering. So also the shaman makes they make all these noises, like these airy, breathy noises, and so she was like making her own. She was like this little shaman, like moth thing, like creature, but like so cool. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot we can go into more of this depth.
I'll ask this way to pull it all together and kind of close that topic out. When you got back, why don't you just talk a little bit about changes you noticed and kind of some benefits of doing it, and maybe how long that integration period happened, or like what was the quickest kind of thing you could apply, but also some things you're still kind of integrating since it's a process that's ongoing.
I would say the primary thing that changed for me was like, so last year when my business started really taking off and I became like doing more successful with that, like I would say it was like a lot very ego based. And so I think coming out of this, like it really, the main thing that ayahuasca does is it really just drops you into your heart, right? And so you start living from this heart-centered place. And so it like just completely turned into a place of coming from service to humanity and like just trying, like wanting to truly.
You said that and I got the goosies.
yeah, like just wanting to truly create spaces that heal and like share this knowledge of just healing and elevating humanity, so I think that was the main thing. And like I got a message like, just to stay in the heart, don't take on projects that don't make my heart happy, so I'm being a bit more selective about what I'm taking on.
I love that. I think that's actually a perfect segue, because I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how you're right now, as we speak live, in the process of really, I don't know if reframing is a good word, but really making sure that your business does align with what your heart wants, your soul purpose, your calling. And I know you're still in the process of really ironing out all the details of what that will look like logistically outside of your intention here and knowing what it could be. But why don't you talk a little bit about some of the changes or tweaks you're making to kind of your business model? You gave an example about only working now with clients who you feel that spark with. So maybe talk a little bit about that shift.
The changes that I'm making are like really incorporating. So first of all, I'm learning a lot. Like I'm kind of in student mode of getting certified in feng shui and like Reiki and like learning about crystals and all of this other stuff. So I'm just absorbing a lot of information, but my intention is to bring all of that into my architectural practice. So like combine, architecture, like building buildings with setting, you know, even like setting crystal grids on like the scale of a building and like on a site, you know.
Why is it not done already? Why? Thank you for thinking of this.
And the thing is, like, I believe that we used to do these things as humans, and it got lost, you know, or it got
erased. In one of your videos, you said you had a kind of a vision where you weren't sure if you've seen it in some other time, dimension, or space, but you saw this physical structure that was very prism shaped, and like it's existed in some dimension in time or space before, but we should definitely bring concepts like that here.
There's a lot of knowledge that's out there that I think is like foundational to just human existence that has been lost for whatever reason, you know, but I do believe that it's all coming back to us now. So
I love even when you say you're in student mode. I'm going to tie that back to your heart space, because I think some of the things you mentioned are so that's really the message of that modality, right? So something like, you know, you went to ayahuasca, you were learning that you have to kind of put your own intention and conscious intention and heart space into whatever you're doing. So for example, Reiki, right? So we understand like Reiki is all about intention, and even you know, it's just such a cool concept when you think about like projecting a Reiki symbol, right? If you're attuned to this universal energy, which we all have, but as a practitioner, you go through certain certifications and attunements to be able to channel that, right? So to be able to project certain symbols in the space, unbeknownst to anyone, to really cultivate like those grids and this energetic field, like you talked about science, like just the way energy actually works from a scientific perspective, or to be able to, I don't know how to say this. I just know you're onto magic with like the what you're learning. So from Reiki to even feng shui, the art of like, I'm not sure if people know what that is, but putting things in certain spaces and the energy that they carry, or something like never having, you know, your chair towards a door because you're closing the door on opportunities. So it's again all about that intention of what you're trying to bring into your space or keep out of your space, for example. So I just think it's so beautiful, even to witness you like in the process of student mode, because right now you're very much in your integration period of saying, I had this business. I had what I thought was like what I wanted for my ego, where I stepped out, finally did my own business. Now I've gone through ayahuasca and I'm like, oh crap. I have to rethink this. I know what I want. And it's pretty scary because when you call yourself a whack nut, everyone thinks I'm a whack nut because I'm talking about projecting symbols onto the wall. And I'm telling a lady I don't want to work with her because she just cares about how much money or whatever. And she doesn't care that it's like a beautiful space and that this is going to attract the dreams that she wants. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it all is kind of full circle, but we're seeing you step out into that purpose that you feel so called to, like while this is happening. Anyone watching this, you have a video that you just made about how easy it is to start your own business, which is an inspiration. And it was so honest because you talk about a lot of the things that come with that, including fear, right? We keep going back to fear here because even that comment I made, people are going to think I'm a whack nut. That's a little bit of fear-based too, where it's like, am I going to like lose? This is also how I pay my bills. So I also need to remain in this 3D world. So there is a piece of me that cares what people think, because I have to also feed myself, but only to a certain extent. What does that look like for how much I'm going to care? But you shared this all from the perspective of being in this vortex of like really stepping into it, which I think is so awesome to get to witness your journey, like so upfront in your process. And this is just basically my plug to tell everyone to go to your channel, go to your sites, and really follow you now, because I can feel the magic that's about to come. Like even just ideas and concepts, like we talked about, like transcending polarity from what's going on in the world, to how we look at even Mother Earth, or how we treat nature, or how we incorporate nature, from grounding with your feet in the grass, from that, the electrons and ions, to speaking to your plants, to experience like Dr. Emoto, where words mean things, your intentions. It's not just because we say it, right? It's the spiritual cuckoo. There's backing to this type of energy work. And I just think it's awesome to be like at the forefront of your journey, understanding kind of your purpose. And like, I see the magic and I feel it. And I'm just so excited that we get to all join your journey up front.
Yeah, it's fun. And I was like hesitant to even start the YouTube channel while I'm still figuring it all out. But like you said, I think there's beauty in seeing somebody evolve and kind of integrate all of this stuff. And I definitely feel like I'm in a vortex right now, as I think the whole planet is kind of in a vortex. And it's also like a lot of people have compared to, you know, what's going on as like a global ayahuasca ceremony. Yep. Like in a way, it
really is though. That's what I feel like.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. I do too. So we're all experiencing it anyways. Like, yeah.
Funny, even with synchronicities for everyone watching, clearly you see it's pretty dark. And I think this is the humor, right? The universe has a sense of humor where I've been in a very like vortex, kind of almost like another dark night of the soul lately myself, where I'm just like, it's just like, what is my life? Like, it feels like the very first time I went through my spiritual awakening. That's how I've been feeling over this last maybe month or so. And I just think it's hilarious that like these like I was joking, but the light's right here because I was like, I need the light back, but I also very much feel like I've been disconnected from the light and source lately, and I'm operating from like my unconscious state, if that makes sense. But I always think it's funny when your external reality reflects your internal reality, which is the whole point of what you're trying to do, right? Bridge those signals, because that's a true statement. Like the spaces, what you're trying to do is really cultivate this idea of energy, and it's a mirror of each other. So the more beautiful spaces, purposeful places, love-filled, intention-filled, consciousness-filled spaces we create, it's just going to be that mirror of the people we are, the society we are. And that's the connection that I find so beautiful. But also, sorry for the lighting, everyone watching this.
I don't mind.
Like, this is hilarious to me because it's really where I was at on my own journey.
Yeah, and that kind of ties in. So like, I was just talking with my feng shui teacher a couple hours ago, and she was sort of like, kind of talking about the process of like analyzing a client's space when you walk in and kind of assess their conditions. It's really like interpreting a dream. Yeah. So to me, it's like everything physical. Okay, so you can also look at it like the spiritual life on earth. It's not about just being spiritual. It's about integrating the physical and the spiritual. Absolutely. And that's like what earth and what being a human is, right? So that's like with architecture. The whole purpose of feng shui is to like subliminally program yourself in an intentional, loving way. Yep. And like just send these signals in your environment to yourselves to get you like on the right path or whatever path you want to be on. Right. So it's like, it's like like you can kind of do this in your own space of just observe like how the way that my space is set up, like what messages are these sending to me, you know, and like almost treat it like you're interpreting a dream or something.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I want to learn more about it. I was like, I'm not coming out of coronavirus without learning something new. So I just started learning Reiki myself. And that's why this is such a pertinent conversation. But
cool.
It's very mind opening, and it's also just so empowering. The whole concept, whether we call it spirituality or not, like we're all saying the same thing, whether we're calling it architecture or not. Like when we're talking about architecting our own realities, it all means internally. Like it's empowering to know that you have that accountability, you have that power, that you have that onus, which I guess is the catch-22. That's why it's scary, right? Because if you're looking at that space you just said and saying, this is reflecting back a lot of crap to me, you have to own that because that's your crap. So that's the scary part of it. But if you transcend that fear and scariness, you step into, okay, if I created that in the first place and I don't like it, guess what? I can also create something even better and more beautiful. And it's just empowering to know that it's all here, and it's all, like you said, from your heart space. And I go on these tangents, which it's just like, I get so excited that I lose all train of thought. Cause I'm just like, just guys, I'm trying to tell you, this is real, and just do all this stuff and learn this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's really like you just said, it's just this sense. I feel like a spiritual awakening is just like this sense of like, oh, this is all real. Yeah. Like what?
Yeah.
You know? It's just like you start to experience it in like a very just tangible way. So, and it's like undeniable. So,
but you learn everything takes on a meaning. And I guess when you go through life without that awareness, it's like sitting here and just looking at your space, like you said, or like the fact that my light is like this, you know, everything is just such a lesson. It tells a story. And it's once you start wanting to pay attention to that story, that's what helps you shape the end or next chapter in your stories. All right. That's a great segue for just talking about kind of the future, right? I keep going back to talking about your kind of framework and your sole purpose and where we could take architecture in the future. So why don't you walk through the audience through kind of your lens of how you see this working out?
So I think like to understand the potential of architecture, we kind of have to look at like the current state and what it is doing or not doing for us, right? So like now when I look at buildings and I look at like, let's say an office space where it's like fluorescent lighting, which by the way is poisonous for your mind.
Oh my God.
Like it's really bad for you. And then like recycled air, like no daylight, like it's all of these things. And even just if you think about like all of us in these separate houses and stuff, like none of this is conducive to the human spirit. Like if anything, it's designed to like oppress us spiritually.
Oh my God, yes.
And like I'm just seeing this more and more, like waking up to just how toxic like all of this stuff is.
It's systemic, which is also another lesson we're learning, but you're absolutely right. It's set up that way on purpose, but why, is the deeper question. Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, I was thinking about this the other day of like, when you say like, oh, this is whatever, this is poisonous or this is bad for you, and then people are like, yeah, but like everything's bad for you, you can't worry about it. But then you're like, but why is everything bad for you? Like it's like it doesn't make sense. So
and you wonder why you can feel like you're crazy, because you walk away like, is it me? Like I'm still confused.
You're like, wait, I don't why are we literally being poisoned by like everything?
I don't know. Maybe we should start there.
But it's basically so fluorescent lights are just garbage. Like they're super bad for you. They literally make you like feel crazy. And actually, so one of the things I'm really interested in is like spatial design for like people with autism or who are on the spectrum. And I think it's actually really relevant to a lot of us, because the way I look at it is like they're the ones who are the most sensitive to these things, but the things that they're sensitive to, like we all are affected by, it's just sort of sub-perceptual. So fluorescent lighting is a big one with them. And then there's a concept of like, I think it's like proprioceptive pressure or something, but that's like the feeling of that you get with like being under a blanket or being hugged, something heavy. So like, how can we recreate that kind of feeling spatially, of feeling like hugged, and it's really soothing for the nervous system. So there's like all of these different
I just felt like I got a hug when you said that. I was like, I love that.
And just like, so evolutionary psychology is another thing I'm really interested in, of like just how humans evolved as biological beings, and that's like all hardwired in our DNA. And there's a lot of needs that we have spatially and then socially. And so like also architecture and sociology are so interconnected. So like we are meant to live in community and like to be around people. We're not like meant to be living in like these separate houses with like we don't know our neighbors. Like it's just not natural. So this goes deep.
So like deep. It is. It's like it's by design everything. Though. It's exactly. It's that question of, and I think it's so symbolic for the spiritual awakening process, which you nailed on the head when you were talking about like, well, why do we just do this if we know it's poisonous? It's like, that's the catch-22. The minute you actually say why, it's like it's beginning your process here. So it's like a beautiful thing, even though sometimes it's terrifying because you still get the answer for everyone else who's unconscious about this stuff. But it's where you focus. Be focused on the fact that you're asking why, because that is the first step that will then ask why, but then why, but then why, but then why, and that will get you to a point where you realize, but I could change all this too and create this by a new design. Who's to say I can't redo this, So I think that's a great symbolic, example you gave there. And you're like, but why do we have to be poisoned by everything and no one's questioning this? The fact that you said that leads you to do the research, look at through the evolutionary psychology to understand where those differences are and how to recreate a different paradigm, right? But it does go so deep into all these layers, because then we talk about conspiracy theories or politics or like systems, like there's a reason why things are the way they are. And it depends which avenue you go down that way, but the question is why, and that's where thought at that.
And it's like just this web that you can keep unraveling forever,
That's what I was going to ask you. With everything you're learning, how do you not go into that web? Because I find myself in a plate of spaghetti when I talk to myself in these conversations, and it's like sometimes that can be so overwhelming because it's just this big hodgepodge of spaghetti, and sometimes it's like we've got to make waffles, right? We've got to compartmentalize because our brain can't physically in this body and human like understand even. So what's your process in like balancing everything you're learning and stepping into and integrating with what you can actually do for inspired action versus maybe even being self-helpless sometimes. That's a psychological thing that happens based on this, where you're just like, oh crap, there's too much. I can't do anything. I'm paralyzed.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely I go into the web, and I just I have a very curious mind too. So I just like exploring like all these different theories and stuff. And I think that I think that's a part of the process, and I don't think it's good to get stuck in it. And I do it in doses. So go, and then if I find my energy is dropping or I'm getting really freaked out, I'll pull back and it's energetic hygiene. So you have to
I love that.
It's a fine line, because I do think it's important to search for the truth, search for answers, educate yourself. Because if you don't really understand that, you can't see what's going on until you see it,
absolutely.
And then you see how deep it goes, and then you're and then you can kind of from there imagine the opposite. Because it's basically how I'm seeing it now is if I was to design a world and society to completely suppress the human spirit and make everybody miserable, this is what I would design, is what we live in.
Drop the mic.
So now it's if we see that as a design problem that's been solved, then we can say okay, if I were to design a society and buildings and architecture and landscape to elevate the human spirit and empower us, bring us into this connection with each other and love and joy and creation and music and art and encourage all of that, it would look completely different. So that's when you start really reimagining things, and that's where I get into these ideas and visions of so one of the things I mentioned was I keep getting this vision of it's this temple kind of thing, it looks like. And it's made out of a rose quartz, it's all solid crystal, and it's carved out into these sacred geometry. I need to draw it and create a rendering of it, but it's these sacred geometry caverns inside of this temple, all made out of crystal. And then there's these little pools inside of it, and there's people sitting in these pools, and then there's people playing these singing bowls. So it's sound also, but it's like a spa, but
I love this concept so much. That's what I saw your video on that. You'll have to remind me which video it is so I can link it. But that got me so excited. And then I start thinking about the spiritual leaders I know. And we talked earlier before we recorded about, for example, our mutual friend Ariana at the Realm of Prosperity with hypnotherapy and how we use certain services. It's like a beautiful spiritual spa, but for the soul, with water that's infused already with crystal, not only the rose crystal, but intention and Reiki, and just this space that you have literally created, this grid where everything is meaningful, has a purpose, has intention. It's stimulating to every human experience, but also this transcendental experience that you can't quite put your finger on. But that's magic. The minute you said that, I was like, this needs to happen in real life. I really just can't comprehend why it doesn't exist. Actually realizing it doesn't exist, I was back to that question of why. Why?
Yeah. And it's the thing is, I think that I'm starting to see more and more that all of that stuff, all the stuff that we're talking about that's considered pseudoscience, it's spiritual technology, right? So it's interdimensional spiritual technology, and we've replaced it with this fake layer of technology that we think is real, but it's it doesn't heal. It just makes us sicker, and so it's, for me, real technology is all this stuff that we're talking about, and it's quantum, so that's
the thing I was gonna make. This is where I think it's important to make a distinction, and I might not do it justice to try to explain what I'm saying, but the reason I keep going back to that whole why is because there's a 3D reason, right, that things are designed this way. When we think about the context of the world today, the issues that are happening, call it conspiracy theory or not, like I've said, there's a reason. And until you're tapped into, let's just call it spirituality for lack of a better word right now, until you're tapped into this higher frequency, higher dimension, higher consciousness, right, you don't start to understand, like you said, that bigger picture, which part of that bigger picture is understanding what's broken, but it's a matter of having people have to do that work to be able to elevate themselves to even understand the concept you're saying, because without that, you're not going to even understand why this is something that's needed. So it goes back to the spiritual concept of having to raise your own awareness and expand your consciousness and do understand and raise your vibration like from that spiritual perspective, because these are concepts that are beyond just like what you could do without doing that spiritual work, right? Like if your third eye is closed, for example, like you're not going to get to a capacity where you're able to see this veil open to say, okay, it's designed that way, but we can only transcend that if we raise our collective consciousness. So how do you raise the collective consciousness? Is by doing your work. So it's like this shift where you have to bring spirituality kind of into this conversation about architecture, because even if you build that space, if we have a world where that dominant power and agenda is working, you're going to have no one there, because we're not doing the work to have people understand why real healing is needed that way. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
In this brand context? Okay.
Yeah, because it's like being able to perceive, seeing through the matrix, basically.
Exactly.
Like you have to have that.
You're supposed to sing. I'm like 3 hours later, I'm like, and then what you have to do, like, so obviously the Matrix.
I've watched The Matrix, I think 3 times during quarantine so far. Like it's like real.
Like just watch the movie and you'll get what you just said. And you'll watch the movie in shorter time than what you just said. So do that.
Yeah, but there's a lot in there. And then my other favorite movie right now is Avatar. I rewatched Avatar lately, so that's like the opposite side. It's like the anti-Matrix, you know, is like being plugged into these natural powers that are here on Earth. So yeah. What
other ideas are you thinking or playing with? Because that was like an amazing kind of just example. Any other come to mind in terms of like nature more so, or just how you infuse that, or what other types of things are you considering in the future of your business?
So there are a lot of really great practices that are already out there. Like there's a design process called passive solar design, which is basically, it's like how you orient the building on the site to work with the sun, so that like the sun heats the buildings in the winter and then it cools it in the summer. So you have like shading devices or trees or something. So there are these amazing things that are already out there. And then there's like ways to heat and cool the building passively, just through like stacking and using pressure to like bring in breezes. So it's like, these things are already here, you know? I think we can do, like, the way that I'm seeing the future is like a combination of like super high tech, like Tesla technology, in combination with like these sort of ancient, like going back to kind of indigenous culture types of things. And like, and I think building style comes into that.
And I also think your intuition comes into that, and that higher knowledge comes into that, and that intuitive kind of tapped into source where you can get some of, like, it depends what you think an idea is, right? If you understand like an idea just lives in consciousness and it just looks for someone who's open to that idea, right? That spiritual work, like that's kind of where you talk about, even, yes, you can research kind of different modalities and ancient time things, but I think what I keep bringing it back to is there is like something about spirituality that requires that plug in too, because there are downloads, for example, or there are ways to talk to spirit guides, which isn't just written in whatever you might be researching, right? If you believe in this concept of spirituality, there's this feed that you connect to that you can't just get from this 3D world, but that's also part of your process.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like people who, you know, like people in these ancient cultures, they were so tapped in. And so that's why like all of their buildings are perfectly designed to like do all these things and perform in all these ways where, you know, like they didn't need air conditioners and things like that. Like they're, and also, so this is another thing, is that it's really bad for us to be at the same temperature all day long. So it like, I don't know that like so much about this. This is more like medical science, but it does stuff to your body and your hormones where if you're like in a temperature controlled environment all day, it weakens you like physically. So it's good to have temperature fluctuations throughout the day and things like that.
I believe it. You're preaching to the choir here. Everything you say, let's do it. What do I sign up and say yes? I want everything building or creating.
And then like lighting too, right? Like having all these artificial lights like messes with our sleep cycle and our ability to dream and like all these kinds of things. So yeah, for me, I see it like more getting back to just this connection with nature, living more in community. Like I think we're very also socially starved as a society, and just like
absolutely.
You know, like we're just like this conversation is like what I want to do.
And social media, and now social distancing. Yeah. It's all these layers of just distancing over time, and what that's created as far as us not knowing that intuitive, like it's that connection. Like I'm you, you're me. Like I need you only because I need me. Like you don't understand that, but like that is that whole full circle. Like I need you because I need me. You are me, so I need me, and I'm missing a piece of that when all of these things are separating us more and more, and again by design. So I get excited for meeting people like you, and that comes full circle. So with that, what advice to kind of pull all this together, from spirituality to using whether it's science or medicine or psychology or whatever have you, to stepping into your soul purpose, to your experience with ayahuasca, to starting your YouTube channel, just what would be your kind of umbrella kind of closing, and any advice you would give to someone watching this starting to go through their own kind of awakening process?
Okay, so decalcify your pineal gland is a big one.
Yep.
Just look into that.
But again, by nature and design, there's fluoride in toothpaste, you know, things like that. But we've been there. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. But
And that is like, when you start to look at that, that is the most attacked thing. And it's technology. It's a radio, you know, like we can get information through that. So decalcifying the pineal gland is super important. And then I think just like balancing, if you are like seeking out truth and things like that, balancing that with taking care of your heart and your energy, because it can be a lot and pretty disgusting and whatever. So it's like just find a balance of that, and then just coming back and cleansing and clearing and grounding, you know. So.
And how do you do that yourself, as far as what tips you would give to someone on how to do that?
So a really good one is to go and walk around or stand on the earth barefoot, to like connect your energy to the electromagnetic grid of the earth. It's like instantly, there's a whole movie about this I just watched, but it instantly like electrifies you with like good earth energy. So that's a really good one. Like literally grounding your energy is a real thing. And then I think just like taking like social media breaks is a really healthy thing to do too. Absolutely. It's hard for me because there's like so much happening. You just want to like be caught up, you know?
But I notice the difference. You do notice a difference when you take a break, for sure.
Yeah. I also been really into solfeggio frequencies. Do you know about those?
No.
Okay, so there's it's like these certain frequencies of sound, and it sounds kind of like ambient, like ethereal music, but I've been playing those like at night when I sleep, and they're at these different frequencies that they have different effects on your etheric body and your physical body.
Okay, so I just call it like frequency or hertz music, but you're saying it
actually
okay. Same thing. That's same thing. Now I learned something new too. See, this is beautiful. I've learned so much. That's definitely helpful, and takes you also into some cool places sometimes when you don't know. I've listened to some of that music and been transported, like, where am I?
Yeah, music is also, I would say, a technology. I like calling a lot of things technology.
I was gonna call that out, because I think we keep saying this whole thing about meeting people where they at, but I think technology is such a perfect word that like bridges all these things together, but makes it sound so much cooler when we're speaking about like the age that we're in, and like just it's a perfect word to be like, okay, that's not weird, that's cool, it's exciting, it's cutting edge, like this is where we need to start going. And I think that's a perfect word. But music, like I think one of my favorite all-time kind of healing experiences, to your point, was I went to a crystal healing singing bowl concert, and I swear it transformed my life. Like I was in realms that I didn't even understand or know, but like that unconditional feeling of love that you talked about during ayahuasca, to like all of my senses were like nothing but everything at the same time. Like I didn't have a body, like I was just like frequency, like to the music. It was the most like incredible experience. So thinking about centers that you create, like imagine all the power, just each of those as their own tool and modality are so powerful, but then in a center together, all of it, oh my God, please sign me up. I'll be a client on all of it, or your beta tester, or any of the things, or all the things. So you just call me.
I mean, I want to build that stuff so I can like go there and experience it too, you know, like so yeah, definitely. And I think that it's going to be a thing in the future. So like I'm very optimistic overall. Like I think we are evolving, and
absolutely,
it's a process. So
it is, and it's a beautiful process. All the good, bad, confusion, fear, it is all beautiful. And I agree with you. It's a really exciting time, even though it doesn't feel like they right now, but we're such on the cusp of a lot more people being attracted to this type of stuff, because we've seen this before, and now we're ready to kind of step into that kind of awakening altogether. So with that, let's do just a final shameless self plug, your website, your YouTube, any social media, any parting words that you have.
My website is www.ATMO Architecture. It's ATMO, like atmosphere, and then architecture.com. My Instagram is ATMO Architecture, and my YouTube is ATMO Architecture. So it's pretty easy. Yeah, all the same.
Awesome.
Final parting words is, I think everyone can just like kind of increase their awareness of how their physical environment is impacting them, and start treating it as like an extension of yourself, and give love to it, and set it up so that it's supporting you at the end of the day, you know?
I love it. Thank you so much. These are conversations that are just like food for my soul. You know, I thank you so much for your time and the good energy and information. I really appreciate it. I'll link all of Anne's details below in the description. Make sure you go support her. Make sure you go subscribe. And when you're ready for new clients and your new soulful business, everyone here, I'm watching you. You go sign up and be a client or visit her centers. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was amazing. Bye.
Bye.